Welcome to Living Our Faith with Archbishop Jerome Listecki. The latest news, important issues, and stories of Catholics living their faith in the Archdiocese of Milwaukee. Here's co-host Jeff Jackson.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this week's program. How are you this morning, Archbishop?
Fine, Jeff, fine.
Here we are, the first week of October. It's been a couple of weeks since you declared the Synodal Declaration. For our listeners who may not have heard much or seen it, talk a little bit about what its significance is.
Well, you know what happened at the end of the Synod, all the work of the Synod was presented to me. And that would have been at the end of Pentecost, that first week of June. And then my responsibility then was to go through all of the work, literally the work of the delegates and the observers and their recommendations on the 8 issues and the various priorities that they establish under each of those issues, and try to come together with some type of workable framework for us to basically to go forward. And that's it was a daunting task because I realized, one, that our parishes already have a lot on their shoulders. So I had to try to devise some way to be able to do that without kind of creating a burden for them. At the same time, I know that the work of the Synod generated a lot of enthusiasm. So there are some people who are already out of the gate. You know, they're running to do that. But the task I had is to try to maintain the energy of the Synod, to try to systematically approach those issues that the observers and the delegates have determined significant for us moving forward. And to do it within the context of the priorities that were established. So in the decree, actually the exaltation of the cross, you know, when I accepted that decree, in the decree, I officially accept the work of the Synod. So the Synod is advisory, then given to me, and then I determine what I'm going to accept from the Synod, and I basically accepted everything in the Synod. So I accepted the work of the Synod to be able to fashion basically a vision going forward. Synods, if there's a failure to a Synod, it's not in the process of the Synod, but it's in the implementation. It's in the exercise of the work of the Synod. It's the continued energizing of the Synod's vision. So I want us to avoid that, and the only way we can avoid it is if we get everybody to buy into it, and if we get everybody to hold ourselves accountable. So if we hold out some issue that all of us, from the very person in the pew, through the parish, through our institutions, religious communities, healthcare facilities, the Archdiocese and Center, we're all involved with that particular issue. And I think, you know, that'll help us all to grow, and it'll increase our own participation, the individuals. And if we see just even a fractional participation, we'll be a church that you'll have to contend with, because it'll be a far greater church.
A huge win for all of us. I know one of the pastoral priorities that you identify in there is cultural diversity, and Hispanic ministry has been one of the important ways in the Archdiocese that we've addressed cultural diversity.
Oh my gosh, we have, in one of the givens in the going into the Synod was the acceptance of the Hispanic pastoral plan of the Archdiocese, and I say that's a given is because we have to address that basically as a reality. And that reality is the growing number of Hispanics in this particular community. And I would say not only in this community, but if you take a look at all the communities throughout the United States, you know, you see the growing number of Hispanics. And what's significant about that is, you know, as you take a look at basically an Hispanic community, they're Catholic.
Absolutely.
They're our family. They're us. You know, they're our family. So just as you would have a family member who would be coming in, you want to be able to provide for them, provide for those things that they're looking for from the church. You know, worship. And I would say also a good significant are basically immigrants into a community. And there is much a needed attention by the local church to the immigrant community because there's a greater need by the immigrant community. Having been a pastor before, you can take a look if you're in and this, when I say immigrant community, it could be a Polish community, it could be Italian community, it could be German,
sure.
Be any community. The immigrant community looks to the church for assistance first. Mm-hmm. They don't look to basically government. They don't look to others. They look to the church first. And so the local community's got to be acutely aware of the need to be ready to respond to those needs.
Well, we are coming to the end, actually, of Hispanic Heritage Month in this country. It's celebrated between the 15th of September and the 15th of October. And it's intended to recognize the important contributions of Hispanics socially, culturally, religiously, and also to celebrate Hispanic culture and heritage. Joining us to do a little bit of that this morning is Roy Salinas, who's Director of Religious Education at St. John Paul II Parish in Milwaukee. Roy, welcome to Living Our Faith.
Thank you for inviting me. Glad to be here.
So you've been involved in Hispanic ministry for a long time. Tell us a little bit about your faith story, your upbringing as a Catholic, how you came to the Catholic Church.
Well, born and raised in Milwaukee and baptized a Catholic at St. Hyacinth's Parish, even though my home parish was always Holy Trinity Our Lady of Guadalupe. I had asked my parents why St. Hyacinth's if Guadalupe was our home parish our whole life. It turned out that my godparents lived across the street from St. Hyacinth, so you went there.
There you have it.
But through there, it was exciting, upbringing. There was a lot of activities happening. We went to church 3 times a week. There was a lot of devotional practices, novenas, rosaries, Stations of the Cross, Guadalupe celebrations. Really exciting time. And Sundays, we had to get to church early because if not, you wouldn't get a seat because it was that packed. Standing room only.
Great. Oh, bring back those days, huh?
Yeah.
Right, bring back those days. Well, first, I want to apologize to our listeners. I want to do that because we're talking about the Hispanic community, Well, the Hispanic community is like talking about the Slavic community. You're Polish, you're Russian, you're Slovak, it's kind of a generic kind of term. When I want our listeners to understand the rich the diversity within that term Hispanic. You could be talking about Mexicans or Colombians or Ecuadorians or Peruvians, and all of them may be sharing a similar language, but all having a kind of a rich, diverse culture. You have to deal with that.
Oh, definitely. Especially, because there is a large Mexican community, but there's also a large Puerto Rican and Dominican. The Caribbeans and Central and South Americans are growing. And now we have to be much more aware and sensitive to those needs also, too. Because, not everybody's patron saint is La Virgen de Guadalupe. It's
exactly right.
It might be Our Lady of Providence from Puerto Rico or, these different places. So, it really becomes a real unique. And each one brings their own gift to the community. They really do, either through prayer or through music or just through their faith stories. Especially those that have come from Central America, where there's been some problems in that area of the country. And religion isn't always that free. But to be able to come here and to be openly, share that faith is a wonderful thing.
And that rich aspect of the profession of one's faith through devotional practices is so unifying for a particular community.
Definitely.
I like you. I came to basically an understanding of, although the Virgen de Guadalupe is one that might embrace all of us because she is the patroness of all of the Americas. If you're talking to Cubans, you better be talking about Our Lady of Charity, or right?
That's right.
You better have kind of a sense of the devotional practices of everybody who is within that community. And everyone has their particular adoration or particular veneration to the Virgin.
Exactly. In fact, in our parish, we've opened it up to the Nicaraguan community, and during the Advent season where they come and have a special Mass for the Immaculate Conception, which is their patron saint. And that brings a different type of life to our parish community that we weren't aware of before. And then what ends up happening is that a lot of people start participating in it, whether they're Nicaraguan or not. Even the Anglo community is starting to embrace some of these things. At first they were a little distant because they weren't too sure, but once they got to know them, and then it becomes a different story.
Great perspective. We're talking with Roy Salinas about Hispanic ministry in the Archdiocese. We'll be back in a moment with some news from around the Archdiocese, a special feature you don't want to miss, and more of our conversation with Roy. You're listening to Living Our Faith with Archbishop Jerome Listecki. We'll be right back.
In today's car buying marketplace, the difference is the people inside the dealership. Uptown Motors sets the bar in customer service. Here's Uptown Motors' third-generation operator, John Pintler. John, tell us about Uptown.
We're a firm believer that business and customers can get along and do things in a mutual way here. What's good for our customers is good for our dealership. And what we really thrive on is having people come back time and time again. And the only way to make that happen is to do business in a way that it's beneficial for both sides. The deal has to be right. The car has to be right. And you know what? In some cases, you come to a dealership and you have the fear that you're going to be talked into too much car, things that you don't need. And really what we look at is finding a mutual beneficial way to move forward on a car deal.
Buy a new or used car from Uptown and they'll donate $200 to the parish of your choice. This is not a gimmick. It's who they are. Stop in and see what customer service is all about. Uptown Motors, Catholic owned, Catholic proud. RelevantRadio.com, keyword Uptown.
As we celebrate the work of St. Francis of Assisi, good morning. I'm Grace David with headlines from the Catholic Herald and CatholicHerald.org. October is National Respect Life Month, a big time for advocacy and action for the dedicated workers and volunteers of Wisconsin Right to Life. Started by the late Milwaukee Archbishop William Cousins as Wisconsin citizens concerned for life, the organization fights for pro-life legislation on both state and national levels. This year, the organization transitions from the 40-year leadership of the legendary Barbara Lyons to new executive director Heather Weininger. Lyon says her work has been a privilege and very rewarding, and Weininger says protection for the unborn will continue, along with stronger efforts to protect the terminally ill and senior citizens. At the Vatican, Pope Francis is warning his security team of bomb threats, but they're probably not the types of explosives you might imagine. At a special mass for his security force last week, the Pope said the worst bomb inside the Vatican is gossip. So, in addition to the usual security threats, Pope Francis is calling for an all-out crackdown. The Holy Father says gossip threatens the Church, sows destruction, and destroys lives. This weekend, it's a celebration of silver and golden proportions as Archbishop Listecki celebrates the joy of the sacrament of marriage with couples from across the Archdiocese. It's the Nazareth Project's annual Jubilee Mass and celebration for Catholic couples celebrating 25 or 50-plus years of wedded bliss. The love-filled event kicks off Saturday at 10 a.m. at St. Dominic Catholic Church in Brookfield with a post-Mass reception, fellowship, and a commemorative certificate and photo with the Archbishop. For more information, visit tinyurl.com/Jubilee Celebration 2014. That's tinyurl.com/Jubilee Celebration 2014. Also back again for 2014, it's the annual Hearts United Rosary Celebration, this time at Christ King Parish in Wauwatosa. Join Archbishop Listecki, Auxiliary Bishop Don Hying, and other faith-filled speakers for the message of hope for peace and the family. It's 3 dynamic nights of inspirational music, scripture, and prayer. This year, Hearts United runs from October 5th through 7th from 7 to 8:30 p.m. Visit heartsunited2014.org for more information. That's heartsunited2014.org. The celebration of the Rosary continues this October as the Black Catholic Ministry Commission and the Office for World Mission bring you Saturdays with Our Lady every week this month. Starting bright and early, Saturdays at 8 a.m., this special time includes a reflection on the Blessed Mother, recitation of the Rosary, and a light continental breakfast. For more information, contact Antoinette Mensa at the Archdiocesan Office for World Mission at 414-758-2282. That's 414-758-2282. And this weekend we officially celebrate the work of one of the greatest missionaries of the Church, St. Francis of Assisi. With his profound influence on Pope Francis, fellow Catholics, non-Catholics, and the people of various faiths around the world, this weekend, allow St. Francis to inspire you too. Remember, you can get the latest Catholic news and information 24 hours a day at CatholicHerald.org. I'm Grace David, and now we return to Living Our Faith with Archbishop Listecki.
Thanks for that update on the news from the Archdiocese, Grace. We're back now with Roy Salinas talking about Hispanic ministry in the Archdiocese. And Roy is Religious Education Director at St. John Paul II Parish in Milwaukee, which is the first and only St. John Paul II, isn't it?
First and only St. John Paul II in our
Archdiocese.
In our Archdiocese.
Right.
So certainly the wisdom of, and we'll be asking Roy about that, of bringing three parishes together and then choosing the name of someone like then Blessed John Paul the Second, and then obviously with the canonization it becomes St. John. But tell us, that must have been a little work and a little task bringing three parishes together, huh?
Oh, yes. It was definitely a challenge because you had an established community there. It was an aging community. They were used to what used to be, and then they seen things changing a little bit, and it was a little scary for them. Eventually they came about. Those that were not pleased with the process left, but the ones that were dedicated to the church and to their faith stayed behind, and there was still a good number. And I'm not saying that there was a lot of people that left, but that's the part of the reality. You're not going to make everybody happy, and some are going to leave. But the people that have stayed have worked together really well with the community that's already there, that's being established now. We have our religious education program, which is the challenge is that it's growing and we don't have the space.
Good,
and it's a good problem to have.
Right.
It's a good problem to have. But we would never 5 years ago, we would never have thought of having Hispanic ministry in those three parishes. It just wouldn't be thought of.
And all three of them now have Hispanic.
All three of them. And all three of them have Spanish masses at each one of their sites.
Wow.
And we didn't think it was going to happen, and it did. And what ends up happening is, obviously the Latino culture has this thing of word of mouth, and the word spreads. And they were feeling welcome there, and they were made to feel a part of the community. And I think that's really important to them because there's not very many things that they can trust when they're immigrants here. They don't trust government. They don't trust a lot of other things, but they do trust the church. And when you come to one that's open and accepting, you have a loyal parishioner for life.
And you're the director of religious education. That's got to pose some problems, huh? Because you're dealing with got obviously an Hispanic religious community, but then you still have to deal with the quotes Anglo community. Yeah. So, do you walk gingerly between the two, or what do you do?
Well, at first I used to only have the process in English. Huh? And I figured, eventually the kids are going to assimilate into American culture, and so this is the route to go. And parents are fine with that when they're in their educational process, but with their spiritual stuff, they're still Latino. Mm-hmm. And they still want to maintain that with them. So what we ended up doing is devising a mirror program where we have a Spanish and an English. Now, in order for the children to be in the Spanish process, they need to know how to read and write in Spanish. Okay, because if they don't know how to read and write in Spanish, then that's really just wasting their time. And then another thing that we have that really works well with them, and it's also a good evangelization process, is that going to Mass is a part of the requirement. So what ends up happening is they go to Mass first, and then right afterwards they go straight up to the classroom for another hour and a half of catechesis. And then while the children are down there, we have some people downstairs in the cafeteria area that are doing catechesis to the parents. Okay, because nowadays parents need it just as much as the children do. And they have a lot of questions about the church. And so this is a good opportunity to share that and help them to understand their faith. And one of the biggest challenges is that a lot of the parents, be it Anglo or Hispanic or Latino, want their children to learn their prayers, the commandments, and I'm in agreement with that, but we're also trying to help them build a relationship with Jesus, okay, a community, to help them build up the value system of faith, hope, and charity, help them to develop their value systems, the morals, and just reinforce what they're doing at home And so it's just really trying to work together. And we started about 2 weeks ago, and I still have parents wanting to sign up their kids to the process, and I have to put them on a waiting list.
Oh, my.
Because we just don't have the space for it.
Wow. A couple of years ago, I had the privilege of going to a celebration, would that be appropriate, of Las Posadas, just prior to the Christmas season. Fantastic celebration, one that I knew almost nothing about previously, but one of just many different practices and celebrations that are really unique to the Latino community.
Would you tell us a little about the Posadas?
Posadas are really a neat experience. Yeah. What ends up happening is it usually happens 2 days after the feast day of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And it is really somewhat of a novena of 9 days. Mm-hmm. And what it is, it's the journey of Joseph and Mary looking for a place to stay before the birth of Christ and being, negated at least 3 times and then finally coming to that. And so what it is, it's a reenactment. You get these little children, it's a whole family thing. Okay?
Right.
So you get children that are dressed up as shepherds, and you have a Joseph and you have a Mary. And depending on the individuals, if they have little pets, they bring the pets around. But then what you do is you come together, you do this reenactment, you knock on the door, you're being denied, go to the next door, again, you're denied. And the third one, they recognize who they are, come on in. Mm-hmm. And they're welcome in there. And then there's song and there's prayers. And then there's a little rosary that's done afterwards. And then the best part and the fun part is the little fiesta part afterwards.
You bet.
Okay?
I'll never forget that.
Okay? You get yourself some tamales and hot chocolate and buñuelos and a whole bunch of conversation and piñatas. It's a wonderful celebration.
One of the things that I was most impressed with was what you said, which is the family. It's so family-centered. And it's not just one family, at least the one that I went to. It was a bunch of families, and they had a celebration each night at someone else's home. So you celebrated, yes, with your own nuclear family, but also the larger family of your friends and fellow parishioners. And
yeah, it would be equivalent to a round robin here in the States, but with a religious context to it.
Exactly. Okay, and Posadas literally means doors, doesn't it? Right?
In. It means in.
In, okay.
In,
okay.
Posadas coming to the end to see if you'll be accepted or not.
That was a fantastic. What other?
Well, how about the quinceañeras that are done? When we take a look at a young girl, right?
What's a young lady who in American side would probably be becoming a sweet 16, but the difference is that they come to the church for a blessing first. Okay, and when she comes to the church for this blessing, there's a mass that's being said, and then she rededicates herself to the Virgin Mary, and using the Virgin Mary as a role model to follow those examples until it's the time for her next step in her life, be it education, marriage, or becoming a nun. One of those, any one of those three. But it's another journey on their step of their faith and rededicating themselves to the Virgin.
And there's actually a tremendous family sense that surrounds many of the practices. There's one where the child is presented by the family. So
La presentación. When they first came to us, we didn't know what the heck they were talking about. Okay, but what it is culture. It has twofold things. Okay, the first one is when child is first born, the first place you go to is the church. Okay, and you take the child to the altar and you give thanks and praise to God for this life, and you're dedicating this child to God. The second fold is the 3-0 presentation. Okay, and then they take that from the teaching of Jesus in the temple, where they come in and do the presentation, where he's presented to the community. Okay, and again, another prayer at the tabernacle, and then a prayer of rededication from the Virgin Mary, who will be their guide throughout their life.
Well, this has been a fascinating discussion of all the different aspects of Hispanic.
And it goes back to talking in terms about the diversity. And once you get exposed to it, it's like you, Jeff. I'm fascinated by the fact. So you don't necessarily have to be basically raised in the culture, but when you're exposed to it, you see basically the beauty of it and how reflective it is of the richness of the faith within that community.
I was going to say very, very enriching, fascinating discussion. Let's take a break now. You're listening to Living Our Faith with Archbishop Jerome Listecki. We'll be right back.
In today's Carbine Marketplace, the difference is the people inside the dealership. Uptown Motors sets the bar in customer service. Here's co-office manager Dar Sinoni. Dar, tell us about Uptown.
And working here 24 years, you actually see how they treat their customers not so much as just a customer, but more as a family member. You know, they're very concerned about their well-being, their kids, what they're doing, and I think a lot of people like that, and I think that's why they come back. They like the family feeling. In 24 years, I've seen a lot of repeat customers. I mean, basically, you end up knowing them by name, you know, because you see them so much. So there's quite a bit of people that come in here over and over again and buy their cars.
Buy a new or used car from Uptown and they'll donate $200 to the parish of your choice. This is not a gimmick. It's who they are. Stop in and see what customer service is all about. Uptown Motors, Catholic owned, Catholic proud. RelevantRadio.com, keyword Uptown.
Last week was a particularly hard week for me because I think we had over a dozen breast cancers that we diagnosed just in the 1 week period of time. And there are times when I do have to leave my office and walk around and often end up in the chapel, just sitting there for a few minutes just to try to center myself and clear my head a little bit, because it does get to you. Even though you haven't seen the patient's face and you haven't talked to the patient, there are no 2 days that are the same.
He's a husband.
My wife and I have been married 26 years. I think that's a big blessing.
A father.
I have 2 beautiful daughters. They're both in college now.
A physician.
I've been a pathologist for, I guess in practice, for over 20 years now.
A Catholic.
I belong to St. Eugene's Parish. I've been there for about 13 years.
And a very nice guy.
I'm Guillermo Martinez-Torres. I'm originally from Linwood, California. Grew up in Sacramento, California, and now live here.
Today, Dr. Guillermo is a pathologist with Columbia St. Mary's in Milwaukee.
We try to make a distinction if something is inflammatory, if something is benign, if a tumor is benign, or if a tumor is malignant. It's always interesting. It's always challenging.
However, medicine wasn't his only aspiration as a youth.
During my formative years, I spent a lot of time either in church as an altar server or in the choir or in the hospital as a volunteer. So even though I've said I always wanted to be a doctor, there was a period in my life where I seriously considered the priesthood.
So how does Dr. Guillermo, a man who studies disease and has no patient appointments, live his faith in his practice?
The hardest part of my field is that I get to diagnose cancer. And I know that people's lives will change based on that diagnosis. And so a little thing that I do that just you and I know about now is before I click that button and sign out that report, I say a little prayer for that person because their life will never be the same.
Away from the hospital, Dr. Guillermo is active in his parish.
A few years ago, I was actually on the parish council. I'm also a lector and a Eucharistic minister.
Why do you do all that?
It's something I've always done. I was the typical altar boy, altar server. So it's been part of me. It's been part of me forever. And this is a way to continue that.
Following in the footsteps of Christ in his everyday life, Dr. Guillermo Martinez-Torres, promoting the power of healing and compassion, even for patients he may never see in person. Nisa Dalmas, Living Our Faith Around the Arch.
Great story. Thanks, Nisa. Thank you so much to Roy Salinas for joining us this morning to talk about Hispanic heritage and ministry in the Archdiocese. Archbishop, before we close, please lead us in a prayer.
Yes, and I'm going to ask our guest, Mr. Salinas, to lead us in a common prayer, but in the Spanish language. And if you would offer Hail Mary on our behalf of our listeners.
With pleasure. Dios te salve María, lleno eres de gracia, el Señor es contigo. Bendita tú eres entre todas las mujeres, y bendito es el fruto de tu vientre Jesús. Santa María, Madre de Dios, ruega por nosotros pecadores, ahora en la hora de nuestra muerte. Amen.
Virgin of Guadalupe, pray for us. And may God's blessings be upon you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Archbishop and Roy. Thanks to all of you for joining us this morning. We'll be back in a week to present another edition of Living Our Faith with Archbishop Jerome Listecki. I'm Jeff Jackson, wishing you a happy weekend. See you at Mass.
This has been Living Our Faith with Archbishop Jerome Listecki and co-host Jeff Jackson. Join us again next week for the latest news, important issues, and stories of Catholics living their faith in the Archdiocese of Milwaukee.